Okay, cool. So we need to know.
It's this code. All right.
Okay.
Yep. Is it working?
We are live.
Live.
Yeah,
Is the
live.
sound all right? Operation Steven, Soko on both channels.
Yeah, hello, Aqua. Yeah, please.
Sound all right? Video all right?
Yeah, let us know if the sound quality is good.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Cool.
Wait. Cool.
Yep.
Right.
Cool. Operation Steven, are they saying the sound is all right?
Yeah, Operation Steven is fine.
Oh, so okay, cool. All right, okay. Thank you very much. It's a long day, but hopefully a productive day. Essentially, we only live for maybe how many years? I don't know, maybe 20, 30, maybe for 40, 50, 100 years maximum. And we've got plenty of work to do in our short lives. And that's where I think I've had a sort of a similar point made. I've had similar points made with some other team members in the Operation Steven core team also, which is we just haven't got time. So every single moment is precious, and that's where we are doing these intense courses. But thank you for all the patience and the support and so on. Life was intense. In the first century for the apostles, it wasn't easy. They had their lives at stake. And so I think we haven't, I don't think we have gone to that extent at all. All that we've done is maybe spend a few hours, which is not a great deal in comparison to maybe put in a Roman prison of the first century where all sorts of things could happen to you, or head being chopped or whatever else. Yeah. So through God's grace, our part of the challenge in Operation Steven is, of course, we're doing the theoretical training now. We also, God strengthening, working on practical outreach trainings. How to put some of these arguments into practice. And sister actually just yesterday gave a very interesting idea to be explored. But essentially the thing is, one after another, we're going to bring together a holistic program of learning theory, learning practice, but also being discipled while going through all of that. And part of that discipleship is going to be this idea that we need to live for God. There is no other option. If God gave His precious life for us, then my life is not even worth a fraction of what He gave for me. And so, but this is the best I could give, so I need to give. And likewise, we all need to. And if Christians gear up to that extent, if not millions, at least thousands in a country, and I'm sure there are plenty of well-meaning Christians in nations like ours, but well-meaning isn't sufficient. And there are plenty of Christians who are sacrificial, submissive, humble, and so on. Those things are also not sufficient. This is a war. We are in the thick of war, thick of battles. We need to be all out for God in all sorts of different ways. Anyway, hopefully, through God's grace. And I've been considering lately what would happen if I'm put in prison. And part of the leading by example is to be prepared for those things also. Anything and everything for God, Christians need to gear up to. So in that regard, I'm really happy we're going through intense training. But having said that, I do appreciate your patience and kindness and good feedbacks and all those things. So thank you very much. So the last couple of sessions, of course, the overall module, the question, the topic for the module is evidence that back up the Bible. Why do we trust the Bible? That's the overall module topic. First couple of sessions we looked at Old Testament, and there pretty much many things mattered. Now we have moved on to the New Testament. Like what we did in the Old Testament, it's going to be 2-session idea, where this session I'm going to go through the straightforward case first without caring about challenges people have raised. Just go through the straightforward case first, lay out a case, and in the second session we'll try and see what challenges people are raising against our straightforward case and try and see how to deal with those challenges. So that's the broad structure for this session and next session. The one thing which is unlike what it is in the old, what it is for the Old Testament, is that unlike for the Old Testament, where many things mattered, in the New Testament, and as a matter of fact, if you put the entire Bible together, there is nothing that matters as much as specifically 3 or 4 days in history, which is Jesus' death, judicial process, death, burial, resurrection. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a very important point here, which is, if that is true, if Jesus died and came back alive, it is possible we could even logically, coherently, meaningfully say, I don't care what comments you have about the Old Testament. I really don't care. If you see what I mean. If this is true, He is God, period. That could be the end of an argument in itself, and quite logically, credibly so. And it's not a whimsical point, it's a very credible, holistic point. The resurrection is true, end of everything else falls in place. And that's very important. In other words, what we dealt with the last couple of sessions are purely for the sake of being comprehensive in what we do, or exhaustive in what we do. But this is the most. If you only have 2 hours to train yourself in, this is the deal. Our Lord Jesus Christ, and especially death, burial, resurrection. Did that happen or not? Okay, having said that, what I'm going to do is, even though I said New Testament, I'm going to now revise, and I'm going to say, my focus is going to be purely on Jesus' life. And once that's settled, everything else will fall in place. And so whether Paul went around where he claimed to have gone around and all those things are purely sort of extra bonus points. This is the base. Now the first topic, the first heading, which we cover in 20 seconds in this module, is that New Testament, the context is historical. New Testament has plenty of information about people, about geography, about places, about politics, about economics, sorts of different things. In the Gospels, in the book of Acts and elsewhere and so on. And so far, there has not been found anything which is incorrect. We are really talking about 100 plus specific details about history which is sort of secular history, not the religious part. And so that determines the context of what happened, and that is certainly historical. Now, some of us have joined, Anna is new here, and maybe a few more on the live chat here on Operation Stephen, and not sure how many followed Module 1 in SOCO also. Some of us are new, so you might not be familiar with the book that I showed last time around. So I've written a couple of books. One of those books corresponds to this, establishing the historical Jesus to be God. And there I've dealt with this context is historical in a slightly more detail. Giving just some information about geography and politics and so on. But today I'm just going to say, please take my word for it for now, and then we'll progress ahead. And the reason is I really wanted to spend time on this. If we spend much time on that, which I tend to do because I speak a lot, if I start on the topic, I find it hard to control myself. So I am through design avoiding that. Coming to this, Jesus' life, teaching, death, burial, resurrection, and divinity. Let's start off there. And the plan is, we're essentially going to go through 9 specific pieces of historical evidence. Unlike when we were dealing with the Old Testament, here, thankfully, these are literary. Stones don't talk much. So if you find something in the stone and then it just says Omri, son of so and so, well, okay, it's good. But here we are talking about language. We're talking about expressions. Sometimes even narrations of events which have been preserved in these documents, which is much better. And so I'm quite keen to get on that. So evidence 1, let's go through them one by one. Tacitus. Shall we go through the names alone first, please? Tacitus, Josephus, and then finally Babylonian Channel. These are people, that's a book. So we're talking about those people. In regards to Tacitus, we're talking about Annals, Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Pliny the Younger, a particular letter that he wrote, Suetonius, the lives of the 12 Caesars, in the same book, but a couple of different passages, just like for Josephus. Lucian of Samosata, a particular satirical story that he wrote, of which the protagonist, the hero, the center guy, was this man called the protagonist. So learning English, some of these pronunciations is a bit hard for me, but thankfully we have people around. So when I know my pronunciation is not right, I'll normally ask like that just so others don't miss my point. So thank you for that. So the Peregrinus is that guy there, and so that's the rough collection of evidence that we're going to see. Evidence we're going to see, and what I'm hoping to do. Is there any problem with the live stream? No, okay. Not so. There's no problem with the live stream. Okay, cool. All right. What I'm hoping to do, once we read through some of the details, what I'm hoping to do is essentially reconstruct a crux of the life of Jesus purely using the sources that I've just mentioned so far. That's the idea. If I can do that, it's pretty much like learning about Jesus from outside the Bible. And there's a particular reason I'll do that. I'll get to that later. That's the idea. Now, what do I mean by the crux of the life of Jesus? Jesus is a very popular name of first century Judea and also at various other points in time in Judea. But the fact of the matter is, it's my phone. Sorry. The fact of the matter is, we're talking about a very particular Jesus. Despite the fact that it's a very popular name, we know who we are talking about, and he is, in the entire history, reasonably, uniquely identifiable as someone who was claimed to be the Messiah in the first century, and so on. So we're talking about a very particular Jesus who had disciples, who had extravagant claims about himself, even to the extent of claiming to be God, who had a completely new teaching on top of the Old Testament, signs and wonders, miracles. Jewish leadership were offended. Jewish people planned to destroy him. Jewish people accused him before the Romans. Romans took him, condemned him, and he was crucified. Jesus' early disciples believed that he came back alive. They worshipped him, both before the resurrection and after. The early church was persecuted right in Jerusalem and elsewhere, but certainly in Jerusalem, persecuted. And the early church grew from Jerusalem. And these are important points, right from Jerusalem. I'll tell you why in a bit after making some other arguments. But I think most of the terms there are very important, most if not all terms. Now, for instance, if Muslims or some other people come and say, "Oh, Jesus was just a regular law-abiding Jew," some of these points would stare them at their face. No, he had extravagant claims. Clearly, he had a recognizably, demonstrably a new teaching. He was not a teacher of just the existing stuff. He taught new stuff. To an extent, claims of him were considered extravagant during his time. Miracles, signs and wonders, people were offended, and we know the particular reasons why they were offended and so on. And Jewish leadership tried to destroy him and so on. You see what I'm saying? So each point has a reason why it's there, and once put together properly, once understood properly, essentially the point would be that is the Christian view. Any other view of people who would like to use Jesus just wouldn't fit in here. Cool. Okay. So having said that, if you look at the second column there, each column, as you can see, what I've done is I've given numbers for each evidence. Evidence 1, 2, 3, and so on. Yeah, going up to 9 here. And what you find is, for example, the source 1 actually gives us information about particular Jesus disciples, Roman condemnation, and so on. So, essentially using them, you can really construct the entire story. Entire crux is, I guess, the point. For Roman condemnation, we have at least 2 sources testifying. So, when you use those 9 sources, you really have no column left not filled in. In other words, when put together, they can tell you the exact crux without even using the Bible. Yeah, so far with me on that? Yeah. Alright, cool. So now what we'll do is just go through the sources one by one. For simplicity's sake, I'm even ignoring descriptions of the writers, but bear in mind these are not simpletons. These are massive individuals. This is, for example, a guy who is of the stature of Pontius Pilate, but also on top of being a governor like Pontius Pilate, he was a very, very qualified historian. His historical works are some of the best available from the first century, second half of first century. He was governor of a region of Turkey and so on. So that's a quick summary. The point is, each one of these guys are very prominent guys. They're not simpletons, they're not nobodies talking about some stuff. All possible, credible people who could talk about Jesus did talk about Jesus. Is, I guess, one of the important points. Okay, now, but for simplicity's sake, I'm ignoring all that because I really want to dwell on the actual content of what they said. But more details on the context and so on are available in that book for people to check, certainly. Okay, now let's read this together, please. Annals 1544. So this is in relation to Emperor Nero of Rome. Of course, Tacitus was a governor under the Roman emperor. So he was sort of, in that region, he was second in command, sort of thing. Apart from the emperor, who was a centralized figure, in this region, he is number 1. Okay, he now talks about something that happened during the time of Nero, and this passage is about that. But neither human help, nor imperial munificence, nor all the modes of placating heaven could stifle scandal or dispel the belief that the fire had taken place by order. The fire that he's talking about is the fire in Rome, which Emperor Nero was accused of having caused, and in that context he's making some comments. Fire had taken place by order. So people are trying, Nero was trying hard to say, well, the fire wasn't because of me, but no one seems to take that on board. Therefore, to scotch the rumor, Nero substituted as culprits and punished with the utmost refinements of cruelty a class of men loathed for their vices, whom the crowd styled Christians. So Nero, people were accusing Nero. Nero wants to find some other scapegoat. Who is he using? Christians. Who are called Christians? Who are these Christians? Christus, the founder of the name. So Christians are apparently just named after the founder of their group. Had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius Caesar by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilatus. And the pernicious superstition was checked for a moment, only to break out once more, not merely in Judea, the home of the deceased, but in the capital itself, where all things horrible and shameful in the world collect and find a vogue. This passage itself is a remarkable passage in the way he presents 20 different ideas in just 5 or 6 lines like that. Remarkable, and that's part of what Tacitus is known for. Succinct, clear, accurate history is what he writes, and that we understand not alone through this passage, from the rest of his writing. What someone else might have taken 10 different statements to explain, he will just use one statement with the right words, put in the right order to clarify, to communicate. So, what do we find there? We find a group called Christians he is talking about. Who are these Christians? Christians. So, in terms of timeline, in terms of what we understand about what Nero did to the group that he did, plus adding up the other things, what we understand is these are clearly in reference to Christians that we call Christians today. And clearly, Christus is the founder. It seems Christus is acknowledged as the leader of that particular group. So, element 1, particular Jesus, obviously is talking about one particular person who he isn't even naming as Jesus but as Christ, which is the unique way you can identify Jesus as the Jesus of the Bible as opposed to any other Jesus. When I say Jesus of the Bible was the Messiah in the first century. A couple of other Jesuses in the Bible also. Joshua is the Jesus again, but in a slightly different context. Okay, so Christus, the founder of things, to keep things in control. Check for a moment, only to break out once more. Look at the language used.
Welcome.
An official governor is saying, I tried to control, but things went out of hand again. So we're not talking about me trying to speak, try and negotiate with my neighbor. We're really talking about someone who would have tried all things which were available at his disposal to make sure these people weren't spreading pernicious superstition, but they still managed to break out once more. Not merely in Judea. So clearly he's testifying there was persecution in Judea. The home of the disease. He calls it pernicious superstition, now he calls it a disease. But in the capital itself, Rome, where all things horrible or shameful in the world collect and find a vogue. So you see, when put together, you find the Romans condemning the growth of early church. How could, when he tried to check, it could break out once more? Break out once more, not alone to stay inside Judea, but also to spread, even going to Rome and so on. So clearly he's giving the story of persecution and growth despite persecution here. The point is, so we've collected those things from you. 1, 2, 9, 13, 14. So if I just show you here. 1, 2. Number 1 is 1, 2, 9, 11, 13, 14. You see how the table has been constructed. Okay. 10 seconds break. JC is changing battery.
Has somebody asked the room for the year of the letter?
What was what? The letter.
Yeah, the year of the letter.
So here's where more details in the book. Essentially, Tacitus lived in the second half of first century and he died early second century. So the worst case or the latest case for this particular, this is not a letter, this is really a history book. The worst case scenario, the latest case scenario is early second century. But an average case scenario is late first century. So we're really talking about a few decades after the ascension of Jesus. And a question asked for the sake of the other audience, especially on live chat, what is the date for Tacitus writing? Most of these people are really second half of first century people. Most of these writings, if not second half of first century or latest first half of second century. In other words, pretty early for someone who wasn't a disciple. Of course, these aren't following Jesus, trying to interview him and stuff like that. So you wouldn't expect them to. The other thing is, you don't have a first century historian during the time of Jesus available at all in the first half of first century. Who is there? No one. So the earliest possible records are from these people. Okay, Josephus. What does Josephus say? He is a Jewish historian. His life is interesting. Jew by origin, Jew by ethnicity, but he had friendship with friendship in Roman circles and so on. He was with the Romans for some time, with the Jews. Jews thought he was betraying them. There was all sorts of complex things like that. But regardless of all those things, he is certainly a first century Jewish historian who Jews take seriously today. So he has written two main books, both of which are related to Jewish history. One of which is Antiquities of Too tired. I can't even pronounce properly now. Even the words I can pronounce otherwise. My lips are failing me. So one book given references there. Let's read the first passage there. When therefore Ananias was of this disposition, Ananias is the high priest, who is understood to be Ananias of the Bible. When therefore Ananias was of this disposition, he thought he had now a proper opportunity to exercise his authority. Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road. So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others, or some of his companions. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. So clearly Jesus, the one who, when you add that, we're talking about one particular person, who is Jesus Christ of the Bible. So there's no confusion. And people had known it. If you use this qualification, it's Jesus of the Bible. And so he goes on to say his brother was accused and then as a breaker of the law and delivered to be stoned. So we understand this is a record of Jesus, our Jesus, Jesus of the Bible, and possibly he's talking about persecution of the early church in Jerusalem. Clearly, someone here was accused of breaking the law. For all those who want to say that, especially Muslims and also some of the other cultic groups, which see Jesus as the person who obeyed the Mosaic law and that's all he did. Clearly that wasn't the case time and time again. First century people clearly took Jesus and his followers to be breakers of the law systematically. So accused of that, and delivered them to be stoned. Okay, so that's Josephus. Particular Jesus, possibly persecution of early church in Jerusalem. And the only reason I say possibly is because, of course, here we're not talking about a group. We're only talking about one named individual and maybe a few others with him. And that's why I haven't extended that to the entire church. Just so we are accurate in what we're doing. Josephus, another important passage, much more popular than the other passage. Let's read the entire thing first. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man. For he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, Those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct at this day. Now, interesting passage. Manuscripts of Josephus are preserved historically, were preserved in the Christian world, because of course when I say Christian world, I mean at least by self-recognition Christians. I'm not talking about whether they were sincere Christians or not, that's a different story. The point here is because of the fact that manuscripts corresponding to Josephus were around in a place where there was quote unquote church. People undermine some of these. And so, one of the things they do is, some specific portions of this passage, they claim, similar to the red letter argument we were talking about earlier. They say, oh, some of these doesn't seem to have come from Josephus himself. It seems to have been things which other Christians might have added. When I say other Christians might have added in the centuries after Josephus, just to suit them. There are particular arguments against this, which enters into plenty of detail as to why that can't be the case. But again, these kinds of arguments would go on forever. But sufficient is to say for me right now, you see the parts I have italicized there. You can pretend they didn't exist here. Josephus never wrote this. The parts italicized. Pretend they were not written by Josephus. Even then, without that, we still have enough information for us to deal with what we want to deal with. Anything else on top, which I think would be plenty. I personally, based on the reasons I have read and reading up on the life of Josephus also, I have reasons to think that he most likely would have written the entire stuff, but even ignoring that for now, we're going to see the remaining stuff is useful. Anything on top would be just bonus. Particular Jesus' disciples, new teaching, miracles, Jewish accusation, Roman condemnation, crucifixion. Particular Jesus a wise man, a teacher, a doer of wonderful works, both Jews and Gentiles by his followers. He was killed at the hand of Pilate. So what Jesus comes to mind? The Jesus of the Bible. So he was talking about a particular Jesus who had disciples, who had both Jewish and Gentile disciples. New teaching. Obviously the principal men did not like what he was doing, and so on. So he drew over to him as if there is some sort of a drawing to him, as opposed to purely saying, I'm only talking about the Old Testament, if you see what I mean. I'm talking about something special on top, and therefore I'm asking you to come to me. So expressions like these, the tone of the expression, the way in which things are portrayed, clearly suggests some additional stuff which might not be obvious in simple reading. And that is why new teaching, to me, when expressions like that are used, drew over, to me that is suggestive of something special happening on top of merely the Old Testament. So new teaching, miracles, doer of works, he says. He was a doer of wonderful works. Jewish accusation, principal men among us led him to Pilate to be condemned. Roman condemnation, of course, Pontius Pilate himself was involved to crucify him. And crucifixion was the mode of punishing Jesus. So those things we get from there. How are we doing in terms of time? We need to rush through. In the meanwhile, the method I have observed towards those who have been denounced to me. So Pliny the Younger is writing a letter to a Roman emperor, and essentially the context of this is he's asking for suggestion as to how to deal with Christians. To him, it seems like these people are misbehaving. I have tried a few things. If you have a better idea, please let me know. And while he's asking for help, he's also trying to be friends, be in good terms with the emperor. So a couple of things happening simultaneously. So that's the context. In the meanwhile, the method I've observed towards those who have been denounced to me as Christians is this. This is what I've done. I interrogated them whether they were Christians. If they confessed it, I repeated the question twice again, gave them another chance, adding the threat of capital punishment. Who is Pliny the Younger, by the way? He is similar to Pontius Pilate and Tacitus. He is another governor, again, late 1st century, most part of his life. Governor with power. So if he condemns, and he also ruled he also governed in the region, in another region of Turkey. So if he threatens, it's a real threat. It's not some wishful thinking. This is you're proper dead if you don't listen. If they still persevered, I ordered them to be executed. For whatever the nature of their creed I don't care what their beliefs are. Whatever nature their creed might be, I could at least feel no doubt that contumacy and inflexible obstinacy deserve chastisement. I don't care what their rationale is, but if they are insistent that they would stand firm in what they believe, despite me asking them to reconsider, I'm going to kill them. It just doesn't work in my realm. They have to reconsider. They have to, multiculturalism and also things that we talk about. They have to give up. If they don't, purely for the sake of them not doing that, I execute them. There were others also possessed with the same infatuation, but being citizens of Rome, I directed them to be carried thither. They affirmed, however, what did they do? They affirmed, however, the whole of their guilt. What did the Christians do? The whole of their guilt or their error was that they were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day. Before it was like early in the morning they gathered together when they sang in alternate verses a hymn to Christ as to a God. So clearly, in his view, Christ was worshipped as God, and that was systematically done. Week in, week out, they gathered together on what would most likely be Sunday, based on other resources we have, and bound themselves by a solemn oath not to any wicked deeds, but never to commit any fraud, theft or adultery, never to falsify their word, nor deny a trust when they should be called upon, deliver it up. After which it was their custom to separate and then reassemble to partake of food, seemingly talking about communion. But food of an ordinary and innocent kind. It seems like there was accusation of whether the eating the flesh and drinking the blood sort of thing inaccurately. Seems like there's a chance that kind of idea was floating around him at that time. So he's just confirming, no, I can clarify, that's not what they're doing. They're just having innocent food, ordinary kind, not some secret whatever. I therefore adjourned the proceedings and betook myself at once to your counsel, for the matter seemed to me well worth referring to you, especially considering the numbers endangered. Plenty of people, persons of all ranks. What kind of people? All age, all ranks, all age and ages, of both sexes, and will be involved in the prosecution. And of both sexes are and will be involved in the prosecution for this contagious superstition. Remember, Tacitus says pernicious superstition. He's saying contagious superstition is not confined to the cities only, but has spread through the villages and rural districts everywhere. The message of Jesus was everywhere. Followers of Jesus, all sorts, all shapes, sizes, colors, and whatever. It seems possible, however, to check and cure it. He is even considering, as if that wasn't persecution, he is now thinking about more ways. So many things might be obvious in the way we stress things. One thing I'd like to point out, contagious superstition, pernicious superstition. Who is talking about these as contagious and pernicious superstition? Roman governors. Wait a second, who are they? They are people who are polytheists. They had the Roman pantheon. They were even willing to worship the emperor as God. So I come from India. For Indians who are Hindus, anything goes. Yeah. So what is your religion? That's fine. That's fine, because in comparison to what they have, these things are fine as long as you don't bother them. I consider 330 million gods to be gods, all sorts of things to be gods. Who are you? Oh, you're just calling that one person who seems like a reasonable guy to be God. Fine, no problem. I have no quibbles. You see what I mean? That would be the mindset of a polytheist. Anything can sit alongside them. But what is a polytheist here saying? Pernicious superstition and contagious. So the main thing here is what could be superstition to even a polytheist who considers even people who are alive or dead to be gods. Well, I have one good candidate, which is someone who is dead and then comes back alive only once. In person, in this physical body. No other claim so far, even in a polytheist world, where they have all the annual dying and rising myths, but nothing in the same form, what we call resurrection. So disciples' belief in Jesus' resurrection, yes, that is implied, is an important point I'd really like to make. It's a conjectural point, but I think a reasonable conjecture, I think. Unless people otherwise come up with, in the historical context, a better candidate as to why a Roman polytheist. But by the way, Tacitus wasn't just, he was a polyglot. He wasn't just a governor, he wasn't just similar to him, wasn't just a historian, he was also a priest, an elite priest in the Roman temples of recognized order. Yet he calls these things in the way, things related to Jesus in the way he calls, and similarly Pliny the Younger does also. In other words, clearly something is going on with what was claimed there. Disciples worship Jesus like unto God. So Christians, the Christians didn't see Jesus as God. There are some random claims advanced. People at the park and elsewhere. Clearly, of course, the Bible would clearly disprove that. And other sources also clearly. So, okay, anyway, let's try and go through quickly. So, life of well Jesus. He is a historian. He is a professional historian. As far as what I can see from what I have read, he is not of a great caliber as that of Tacitus in terms of brevity, accuracy, and so on. But he is still a recognized professional historian, Roman historian. So, since the Jews constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Christus, he expelled them from Rome. Is a passage we have here, or a statement we have here. He couldn't even differentiate a Jew from a Christian. And you will find that in the book of Acts also, by the way. Jews were expelled from Rome. And a couple of people who became partners with Apostle Paul were people like that, who were expelled from Rome because of things like these. Why were people not even at times be able to differentiate between Jews and Christians? Because Christians were Jews and plenty of Jews were Christians. It was very much considered to be a central Jewish thought during that time. Later on things changed, that's a different story. But in the first century, certainly, following Jesus the Messiah was considered to be a conservative Jewish thought. Not everyone accepted, but that's a different story. And not every Jew agrees with each other. Every Jew is able to put up with that disagreement. But they wouldn't dare to say this is not central Jewish thought. You see what I mean? It's traditional, conservative Jewish thought. To an extent, some people can't even differentiate between Jews, ethnically Jews, and religiously Christians. Suetonius goes on talking about, in the period of another Caesar, he goes on to say, punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. Again, you see a trend there. Again by a Roman. Mischievous superstition. Christians, a class of men. Punishment. So you find actually, this should be an evidence for persecution also. Oh yeah, because this is not specifically talking about persecution in Jerusalem. I haven't put that under the element that involves persecution in Jerusalem. For me, the in Jerusalem is very important. I'll come to that in a bit. Lucian of Samosata, what does he say? He writes a satire. Whether it's imaginary or not is entirely not clear. People speculate that Peregrinus is perhaps a historical person, and he's just Lucian is just looking at his life and he's sort of thinking, oh, he seems to have had a good life, and he's writing a satire based on that. He's supposed to be, at least in the story, whether he is historical or not doesn't matter. The story he's writing has a historical context, and the historical context is people seem to be abusing Christians, and the way they were abusing was Christians were very open-hearted, very friendly, willing to, don't care about money, don't care about earthly things. They are willing to listen to others and so on, and they are very considerate, very gentle, and they were sold out for Christ to an extent. If you want to tell me about Jesus, come sit with me, tell me. I have all the time to listen. That kind of mindset you see. And it seems like some people had taken that for their own advantage, to earn money. And you see Paul, Apostle Paul and so on, writing about these things, where he says some people are ministering as a means to gain. But godliness in itself with contentment is great gain. Godliness is not means to great gain. And you see that happening. It was then that he learned the wondrous lore of Christians by associating with their priest, Peregrinus. Goes to be in what he calls Palestine with Christians, associating with their priests and scribes. How else could it be? In a trice, he made them all look like children. He is already sort of portraying a higher picture of him. For he was a prophet, a cult leader, head of synagogue, and everything all by himself. A prominent man. He interpreted and explained some of their books and even composed many, and they revered him as a god. From here it's talking about Jesus. He interpreted and explained some of their books and even composed many. He's talking about Christians and related to that. Books and even composed many. And they revered him as a God. Made use of him as a lawgiver. Jesus had a new teaching, a new law. The behavior of them was to an extent, this is new law. Lawgiver. Set him as a protector. Seen God and our protector. Next after that, other, to be sure, whom they still worship the man who was crucified in Palestine because he introduced this new cult to the world. Okay, let me see. Ignore the points I made about the first part here for now. I need to confirm something. My memory fails, but this particular notes I made a while ago, my memory fails, so please ignore that part. Stick only to this part for now, please. The man who was crucified in Palestine because he introduced this new cult into the world. Crucified, we find the land area, we find the man, and we find the reason. The poor wretches have convinced themselves, first and foremost, they are going to be immortal and live for all time. Why would Christians think that could be the case? Like if resurrection is not in their mind. So clearly people understood, these people don't care about this life. They seem to have a better idea. And they, for some reason, thought they were immortal. In consequence of which they despise death, they don't even care if they die, and even willingly give themselves into custody, most of them. Furthermore, their first lawgiver persuaded them that they are all brothers of one another after they have transgressed once. For all by denying the Greek gods and the worshipping that crucified sophist himself and living under his laws. Therefore, they despise all things indiscriminately and consider them common property. Book of Acts. Communal living, common property. Receiving such doctrines traditionally without any definitive evidence. So, if any charlatan or trickster able to profit by occasions comes among them, he quickly acquires sudden wealth by imposing upon simple folk. So with this so far, so some quick conclusions from there. Jewish leadership were offended clearly. Crucifixion there. Disciples worship Jesus.
And they revealed him as
Whom
God.
they still worship. Yeah, whom they still worship. The man. So ignore that part for a minute. I need to read the entire passage again. By the way, for anyone who wants to read the entire story, I've given links. The translation of the entire story, which is not too much. It's just maybe half an hour read. But it's a very cumbersome read. It's a complex idea. It's not good writing, but this is good writing of that time, but not good business writing of today. Not clear enough, not simple enough. But if anyone wants to do that, please do. The last time I read this was many months ago, and so I've forgotten precisely the context of that. I really like to go back on that, please. So please just stick to this for now, as talking about Jesus for now. Yeah? But he was worshipped, obviously, whom they still worship, the man who was crucified in Palestine, because he introduced this new cult into this world. Disciples worship Jesus. Persecution of early church in Jerusalem. How do we know? Well, of course, he's clearly talking about despising death. So obviously they were able to demonstrate that. They despise. He's not talking about theoretical ideas. He's talking about clear evidence that he's seeing. So there was clearly persecution. Why do I say in Jerusalem? I'm roughly. We're talking about the homeland of the church. Now, why did I say this is an evidence for Jewish leadership being offended also? I think part of the reason was that I need to check this again. A couple of things come to my mind. Certainly things like the cult, new cult. So clearly, people there saw that new stuff, not the old stuff. But on top of that, I think I had some other reason also. But let me come back on that also as to why I said Jewish leadership were also clearly offended because of what happened. I think the other point, of course, is the fact that he is clearly mentioned to have been crucified in Jerusalem, in the nation of Israel. So clearly something has gone wrong. So I think I picked up on that to suggest that some enemies came up, and they were the Jewish religious leaders. So let me come back on that more later, please. Evidence 8, Celsus, Platonist philosopher, according to Origen. Second century philosopher, his writings do not survive, but Origen is someone who picks up on some of the arguments he makes and comments on that. Next, he makes the charge of the Savior. So this is Origen writing, who is quote unquote a Christian. So he's saying charge of the Savior, right? It was by magic that he was able to do miracles which he appeared to have done, foreseeing that others also, having learned the same lessons and being haughty to act with the power of God, are about to do the same thing. Such persons Jesus would drive away from his own society, for he says he was brought up in secret and hired himself out as a workman in Egypt, and having tried his hand at certain magical powers, he returned from there, and on account of those powers gave himself the title of God. So the fact of Jesus claiming to be God is there. Let me come back to that in a bit. Power of God, acting in the power of God, doing signs and wonders, miracles and so on, certainly extravagant things related to him. The point here is, the context here is, Egyptians, or some people who were based in Egypt, were already accusing Jesus. They were saying, oh, you learned all your tricks while you were in Egypt. Remember, of course, the Bible talks about Jesus being in Egypt as a child. And this is where people are very keen to find out where Jesus lived in the first 12 years of his life and so on. I think the Bible gives that detail in one line, which is in Nazareth, but and that's sufficient in the historical context of the passage. That one line, to me, refers about his 12 years, most of 12 years. But people obviously haven't read that carefully. And so the point that they were trying to make right at that time is that Jesus learned tricks which he employed. And you would begin seeing developments of various heretic ideas right from the 2nd century and so on. One of those is this. Of course, here we're talking about Gnosticism and knowledge about different things and so on. But you'd see various other ideas also developing right from the start, right from the 2nd century. And we find the indications of that even in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Paul warns about things, Peter warns about things and so on. So they are quite expected, recorded history in the first, in during time of the early apostles. Babylonian Talmud. What's the history of Talmud? Talmud is essentially the collection of rabbinic writings which were begun to be put together beginning in the 2nd century, going on up to the 5th century. So 2nd to 5th century is sort of the timeline for the writing of Babylonian Talmud. There are two prominent Talmuds, one of which is Babylonian Talmud. A collection of writings from rabbis. The claim is that these were ideas which were handed out through centuries, generation after generation. That's the claim. But evidence-wise, we haven't got evidence for that. So now, reading a small passage there. On the eve of Passover, Yeshu, Jesus is derogatorily referred to as Yeshu instead of Yeshua by people who want to undermine him. Yeshu was hanged for 40 days before the execution took place. A herald went forth and cried, "He is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed his way to apostasy." The fact that Jesus led, this particular passage refers to Jesus with, let's say, I'm giving a rough number, 80+% accuracy. Whether this is about someone else is possible, we just haven't got any other evidence. So there's no other issue around this time who fits in this pattern. So this is most likely Jesus, is the idea here. But beyond that, this is not written in a way which gives us, which makes us respect this as a solid historical account, is I guess my point. The Talmud is not supposed to be, it was supposed to be a spiritual account, or quote unquote spiritual account as much as anything else. Okay. Jesus, but if it is Jesus, it fits in really well. Jesus was hanged, well, we might say he was crucified, but we should appreciate, even in the book of Acts, by the way, when Peter preached, Peter referred to Jesus' crucifixion as hanging on a tree. And of course, we might know that the person who hangs on a tree is cursed, and that idea is referred to in scriptures. So the fact that the crucifixion involves the log that comes from a tree, and the fact that you are hanging on it, this hanging, we shouldn't read that as necessarily the way we see traditionally hanging in the 21st century, if you see what I mean. So that's a very legitimate expression of crucifixion also. Crucified 40 days before the execution took place. What is this 40 days before? If we go through the account in the 4th gospel, the gospel which is called the Gospel of John, what we find is when, of course, the Jewish leadership were, including the Pharisees, and there were different kinds of Jewish leadership, by the way. Various quarters of this of the leadership decided that they were going to take out Jesus right from almost the start of Jesus' ministry. They were offended. Oh, you work on a Sabbath day, we'll kill you. Oh, you do this, we'll kill you. Oh, you do that, we'll kill you. But what we understand, if you go through the Gospel of John carefully, when Jesus brought back Lazarus to life, that's when momentum really changed. And we understand that particular event happened that happened, by the way, the Passover, Jesus was killed on a Passover day, and Lazarus' resurrection happened when Jews had come from all over the world for purification, to prepare for the Passover. And so the fact of the matter is, likely it's around the time, it's around a month or so from the actual Passover. So the 40 days is a reasonable estimate of when that particular change in momentum really happened. Time-wise, it matches. And then they then made public they made public essentially saying, don't join with him. We've had enough of it. Sort of announcements were made quite prominently. Lazarus' account is very, very interesting, very important. Why did the Lord wait for, was it 4 days before he raised up Lazarus? There were very important reasons. That was the last ditch effort from the Lord to demonstrate his power in a very obvious way at a time when plenty of even Jews living all over the world would be in the country and in a place which is very close to Jerusalem, in a family which is very related to religious Jews. So in all sorts of ways, Jesus wanted to really make use of the context. Anyway, so and because of that, because of the fact that Lazarus rose, they wanted to kill Jesus and they wanted to kill even Lazarus because they didn't even want the evidence to be around of resurrection, of any resurrection. So he's going forth to be stoned, which is an indication of the fact that we want to take him out. So that doesn't necessarily mean that's the means we're going to use. They were still arguing, how do we make sure this goes through smoothly? Because he has practiced sorcery. Did Jesus perform miracles, signs, wonders? Yes, he did. Even according to people who rejected him, religious authorities, yes, he did. The only difference here, the only point here is that they attributed that to negative powers, dark powers, which we see in the Bible also. What did they say when it came to Jesus? They said, you're doing this through the power of Beelzebub. That's what they accused him of, as recorded in the Bible. And so no wonder, that's the idea captured here. And enticed Israel to apostasy. Did Jesus preach any new thing? Of course he did. And that's why following him was seen as apostasy, leaving the Mosaic, leaving what they considered to be Old Testament principles. So, particularly Jesus' new teaching, miracles, Jewish leadership offended, planned to destroy Jesus, Jewish accusation, crucifixion. Yeah? So far, all right? So you using these points is how I have constructed this table. Like I said, that's the crux of Jesus. I'm not saying, of course, Jesus has plenty of stuff on top of this, but that reasonably captures the Jesus that we are talking about, which is reasonably gives a framework for who we are asking others to follow. All right, okay, now let's come to the final stage. What do we have? So maybe, sorry, let me go to the table again. So now that we have understood this table is reasonable and that this thing in these numbers is reasonable, now let's try and see what the left hand column actually implies. Okay, so in terms of the left hand column, if you see carefully, so Jesus, all the signs and wonders, God, and all those things, yeah. So the Jesus we care about is who we see in the first 5 points. Someone who signs and wonders, new teaching, miracles, claimed extravagant things about himself, had disciples, and so on. Yeah. So the first 5 points clarify that's roughly the Jesus of the Bible, and we can clearly see that he had suffered because of that. So he offended Jewish leadership. Destroyed Jewish leadership, planned to destroy him, and they accused him. Went to an extent enough to get rid of him. So he had offended the Jewish leaders that much. So that's clearly the crucifixion account that we care about. With me so far? Now, why do we take? And now if we move on. In regards to whether Jesus was crucified or not is very important, but that is not sufficient. This is why Paul says, if resurrection did not happen, all our things are in vain. If resurrection is the cornerstone of Christian belief, if resurrection never happened, just give up, get drunk or whatever, lie somewhere, whatever. Resurrection is the case, and therefore we understand this is serious business. We take this seriously. But for that, these extra biblical sources aren't testifying. No one is saying, I saw Jesus rose up from the dead. We ignore Josephus' account, so we're not caring about that particular italicized portion. Remember that? And we are focusing only on the rest. No one is saying, Suetonius isn't saying, we know Jesus rose up. No one is saying that. So how do we deal with this? And that is where the other things come in. Even though they're not saying Jesus rose up from the dead, they are clearly testifying that the disciples believed that Jesus rose up from the dead, and that the disciples were willing to act in a way consistent with that. I know my master died. I know he told me he'll give me life. I don't care if I die now. That attitude you see. So, in terms of bringing these things together, what I'm going to say is, the extra biblical sources are indirect witnesses, not direct, not first hand, but second hand witnesses for the resurrection. And what I mean by that, I'm going to clarify in a couple of minutes. But before that, let me do this. So far, if you carefully note, we are treating the New Testament, the gospel accounts of Jesus, as guilty until proven innocent. Remember, so far, of course, just using the gospel accounts, I can make, or anyone, when I say I can, people can make an account, a case to say Jesus rose up from the dead. There's no other way you can explain this just by using that. But so far, just to make sure, just to give the idea clearly, I am actually constructing the entire case from outside the Bible. So far, with me on that? Crux of the Bible from outside the Bible. Did I look at any passage in the Bible so far? No. From outside the Bible. I want to make that clear, except even using the Bible, we can give a legitimate case, logically reasonable case, philosophically valid case, historically valid case for things from the Bible alone. Okay, but we are taking the worst case scenario possible, going with only this for now. Now, with that in mind, I'd really like to establish that Jesus came back alive through the testimony of the extra biblical sources. And that is where the crucial thing I'm holding on to are 11, 13 and 14. The extra biblical sources are testifying for the fact that the disciples believed clearly of the resurrection. They really were. This is where the pernicious superstition, contagious superstition, they despised life, they considered them to be immortal. All those phrases come in. So they clearly believe in something more than what a Roman pantheon would believe in. And something to an extent the disciples thought they were immortal and so on. Resurrection. They are testifying disciples did that. And they are also testifying, I tried my best to persecute them. And other people of power tried their best to persecute them, yet they stuck to the story. You see what I'm saying? 11, 13 and 14, which means these people, extra biblical sources, are testifying that the disciples have a strong conviction of what they thought was true. The words here are very important. A terrorist wanting to be a suicide bomber means whether his beliefs on religion are credible or not, whether the religion itself is credible or not, the fact that he is willing to die means his conviction. He really thinks it is true. He could be entirely wrong. But that's not what we're talking about. Is the willingness to die means he is convinced it is true. But that entire thing which he is convinced about could be entirely wrong. He might not be able to think properly. He might not have resources properly. Or there could be all sorts of reasons why he might be wrong. But the fact of the matter is his conviction is very true, and that shows up in the willingness to die. Yeah, so far with me? And that same principle would apply anywhere, everywhere. It doesn't matter what religion we're talking about. Yeah, if you're willing to die, sensible people, I'm not talking about one or two people here and there who might be lunatics and so on. Sensible people in plenty of numbers, but they're willing to die, you know, well, their conviction is really true here. Now, the only question pending would be, what is their conviction based on? Can we try and see if that is a if that is a logically coherent, meaningful belief that they have, on which they have the conviction? You see what I mean? In other words, all that right now, where we come to is, I agree you are a reliable witness, you are testifying that you are serious about what you're talking about, but I'm not sure if you can think through properly. Let me do the thinking through process on your behalf, is what we're doing now, is where we've come to. And there, last maybe 5 minutes or so right now, there are crucial 3 elements of their own testimony. So, you are a reliable witness with firm conviction. When I say reliable, you're not lying to me. You're willing to even give up your life for this. So, I can see you take this seriously. And therefore, I want to take you seriously. Why do you want to do this? You might be completely wrong, but I'd like to hear from you. So I can clarify, oh, I see you as convicted, but your thinking isn't right. So let's look for their witness account. What are they saying as the basis for their conviction? 3 important points. They're saying, we saw Jesus dying, buried, and the tomb being sealed. We saw he was dead. No question about that. We know it to be true. It's a public event, not some secret event somewhere. We saw an empty tomb on the 3rd day and going forth. Anyone can question us, anyone can argue against this, whatever, but this is a public thing. We saw an empty tomb. And then these 2 are public. Only this is not public. We saw Jesus show up alive. This is not public, granted. And that is why the others haven't testified for this. And that is why we've gone to one more step in asking them why they think Jesus rose up. So there are 2 things are public, 1 isn't public. The question we need to ask is this a sensible, the question we need to ask is, can we put these things together despite the fact that this is still not public? And can we take this to be seriously valid despite the fact that this is not public? When I say we, I mean Emperor Nero, I mean anyone else who hasn't seen Jesus alive in person, show up to him. Can they take it seriously? That's the question we need to ask. Then, before we get to that, quickly, death, burial, resurrection, death, burial, sealed tomb. Jesus was judged as dead by who? By expert Roman executioners, not some Tom, Dick and Harry who doesn't know what to do. These were Roman executioners. When Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus went to gain the body of Jesus to bury, Pontius Pilate asked the centurion who was on duty to confirm that he was dead. And that's why you know the piercing, and they confirm, yeah, that's true. What are the details behind that and so on is for later discussion. But the fact of the matter is, experts testifying, dead. Roman army, as you might know, if you know briefly even about histories of various military apparatuses, Roman army is arguably one of the best armies in the world, even comparing against armies of this world today. You know, it's very hard to say US army is better than Roman army because they acted in different points in time. US army, the arms, the technology they have is much better. But in terms of organization and so on, it's arguable if they're better than the Roman army or not. Roman army is, in terms of meticulous discipline and so on, the best in the world in a timeless manner. And they were testifying. And we understand that some of the modern medical professionals are saying, well, what they did was a reliable way of testifying, checking if someone was dead or no, or not. The tomb that Jesus was buried in was that of a popular man, not just some random place where people can do all sorts of stuff and get away with. No, this is a popular area of Joseph of Arimathea was part of the council, which is the Sanhedrin, which is a 70 people group that in one manner governed the entire nation on top of the priestly leadership and the king leadership. This is part of another authority structure, the council, synagogue, Sanhedrin, a council of 70 elders. Joseph of Arimathea was one of them. He was a very prominent man, very wealthy, and that's why I said the tomb is not in a nobody's land. And likewise, Nicodemus was a teacher of the Jews. Why did he come to Jesus by night? Because he was very popular. He can't just go show up before Jesus and not be seen by others. He was a very popular man. And of course, on top of that, some of the women had known where Jesus was buried, and the tomb was sealed and guarded. 3-level protection there: the stone, the seal on the stone, and the Roman guard. 3-level protection for that. So that's first one. If anyone had any doubt in that, people could have argued at that time. The ones who led him to be crucified, they could have come and said, well, we have issues here. Don't spread around rumors. There's a problem here. You see what I'm saying? So no one can argue on that. Empty tomb. Again, Roman guard. The claim of empty tomb was public. Anyone could have verified. Of course, the Christians are testifying. We saw the tomb empty. Few women disciples, including Mary Magdalene, later on by Peter and the writer of the Gospel of John, and so on. But the Roman guards were on duty, so of course, even though they haven't come and testified, they're implicitly testifying for the fact that when others are claiming that there was an empty tomb, we haven't got a better case to make. So we'll just leave it there. So they are, through their silence, testifying on the empty tomb. Now, post-burial appearances. To whom did he appear? Many people, various occasions. Mary Magdalene, few women, Cleopas and Simon, many other disciples, including the 11 surviving apostles. Among other appearances, finally Jesus also ascended up into heaven when in the sight of disciples. So where do we go from here? The point is, we are now putting ourselves in the shoes of the disciples who are willing to die, and we are thinking through this on their behalf. I know the guy died. I know he was put inside the tomb. There were people protecting, securing 3-level protection tomb. The body isn't there. And at least 500, might be better, but at least 500 are testifying we've seen him alive. The body isn't there. They are saying we have seen him alive. What better case we have? What better proposal? What is the case that we can present? What's the thing? What better option have we got? Okay, well, 1 + 1 is 2. It has to be 2. Well, we can try for 5 minutes if we can come with some other answer. But after all this, we can only say there must be a connection between the tomb being empty, no body being there, and him showing up there. And how is that possible? Well, the term used for that is resurrection. The body comes up and he shows up. See what I'm saying? That's the only possibility, and that's the case for resurrection. Now, divinity. Of course, when preaching, we are also claiming Jesus to be God, not just some, like Lazarus. Lazarus also came back to life. It doesn't mean he is God. But Jesus is claimed to be God, and the reason is Lazarus didn't claim to be God. Jesus did claim to be God. And that's a crucial reason. How did Jesus claim to be God? And then that's another module. So we leave it at that for today, for today. And we just say Jesus did claim to be God, and that's the reason why people worshipped him when they saw the resurrected Jesus, and even on multiple occasions before that. That's the straightforward case. It almost seems as if it's watertight, which is the case, but people still want to challenge it in a few different ways. What are the challenges, and how do we face those challenges? Let's see that in the fourth and final session, which will be, of course, a much shorter session. But yeah, in the meantime, just for now, for 5 minutes, any question at all so far?
Why do you say that third point was not public?
Okay.
Because if 500 people saw, why is that not public?
Yeah, okay. Apologies. I have defined the words, the phrases I have used in the book a bit better. Sorry, the question.
I'll repeat my question.
Yeah.
Why is that third point not considered a public incident
Yeah.
if there were 500
Fine.
witnesses?
So, if there are 500 plus witnesses, why didn't I qualify that to be public? The reason is simple. My argument is to take the worst case scenario and still argue that the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ is a belief in that is inevitable. Worst case scenario. And if approaching this from the worst case scenario, when I say worst case from a Christian perspective, to try and argue, try and play the devil's advocate as much as possible. And approaching from that perspective, I could say, well, it's only 500. Maybe they were all eluded. Maybe they're all group of the same whatever. I mean, maybe, well, and so on. All sorts of arguments. So that's where, I'm sorry, by no means am I suggesting that 500 people could be deluded. I should have been careful. I think it's I think I should be really careful. But my point purely is, it's not, the crucial point is the appearance of Jesus Christ was not available to anyone and everyone who wanted that to happen for him to verify. Whereas the other things were, I can go and, not me, if I were in the first century, if I just heard the news, okay, I have few hours at disposal, I'll go and visit the tomb now. That was available for anyone's inquiry. This was available for anyone's inquiry. It was a public event. Available, when I say public, available for anyone's inquiry. But this, you can't choose. The Lord Jesus chose who to show up to. You can't command him to show up to anyone and everyone. He just did to whoever he did. And so if you said, I want to really find out if it's true, you only say, well, I'm sorry, but that's something that he decides, not I or you. And that's the only reason. I apologize, 500 people deluded at one time? No. There's no indication of the fact that the disciples who are testifying, the ones who wrote remarkable books which are in the New Testament, some of the phenomenally logically sound documents I have seen are in the New Testament. Like I said earlier, I'm a computer science engineer. I can deal with zeros and ones. I can fairly quickly, if someone says something, I can fairly quickly say, that particular portion of what you're saying, it's a zero. That's how my mind works. It's a black and white. A long statement, I can split things, black and white. 0, 1, 0, 1, I can do reasonably. Logic. From that background, and I've read all sorts of computer books, all sorts of phenomenal computer science books. There are very, very deep computer science books. When it comes to Paul's writing of how he presents the New Testament doctrine, I can only say this clearly has to be God. There is no other explanation here. When even Peter writes in the way he writes, even though he's a mere fisherman, I can again say, you know what? We're not taught. Ignore for me personally. I remember earlier I said, people come from all sorts of different directions. For me personally, even if I didn't have any of these, just by reading the way things are constructed, I can say, you know what, this is not me, human, working here. The point is, why did I go on to that?
The witnesses.
Yeah, so to claim that 500 could be deceived in the context of the quality of material that we see come from some of them would be totally unfair to them. It's not just unfair, it would be really, to be frank, I'd be a fool if I said that, which I did, and therefore I need to apologize. I shouldn't have said that. It's a slip of tongue, slip of mind in this case. I shouldn't have done that. All indications clearly say that the Christian community were reasonably clued up. They weren't fools. But the only thing I mean is that you can't ask for this to be shown to you. The others you can.
And also,
Sorry.
also, if I think back on now, God did not appear to anybody who was a non-believer that we are told of.
Yes. So yeah, but Jesus had a very particular reason. Jesus doesn't want to spoon feed. That we clearly see in scriptures. He doesn't want to spoon feed. If he spoon feeds like some of the Christians, many of the Christians do today, he would have the entire world following him. But he didn't want to. Yeah, at some stages, a few different stages, he sent people away, chased them away through the points he was making.
Any
Question?
Online? Any question from the family online?
Yes, there is one.
Okay.
Okay. So, Arul, do you consider the Shroud of Turin as evidence?
Shroud of Turin. Personally, actually, I haven't studied the Shroud of Turin in detail. I know and appreciate that people are saying that in historical context it most likely should be of Jesus, but personally I haven't studied that in detail so far, which is very unfortunate. I should really do that sometime soon. But I personally, so I have no comments on that for now. But I roughly remember, I briefly did go through some details about Shroud of Turin, and at the time I was reading, I was thinking, this is some good material here. Why I didn't follow up on that is a mystery to me. So when I do study, perhaps I'll be able to give my considered thoughts on that. Apologies to whoever asked that. Sorry. Any other question?
Just the comment on the passage on peregrine. I've
Yeah.
looked it up.
Okay.
And the reason is it's because it's talking about peregrine.
Is it switched on, brother? I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's basically because it's talking about peregrine and how he deceived the Christians
Yes.
into worshipping. So you're right to leave out the first part.
Yes, because after I read the first part, I vaguely remembered actually I had to consider. It's a very tricky passage, by the way. It's not simple. It's not written in a simple style. So it's highly complex. When I read through the entire thing, I thought, you know what? Was he even a popular writer? That was the thing that came to my mind. But of course, thinking at that time might have been very different. But thank you, brother, for that. Because when I read this again, I vaguely remembered going through this complex thinking at that time, and I'm thinking, you know what? This particular first part most likely is Peregrinus, not Jesus himself. And that's why after I mentioned this, I thought maybe I should check this again. But thank you very much. So you are confirming now that the first part, which I said, please ignore, just focus on the last line. The first part does correspond to Peregrinus himself.
Greg would like to know if there is any chronological charts of these events, with who was ruling at the time.
With the life of Jesus, is that a Christian asking some material to study? Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to understand the context. So
Like the evidence that you were giving, if there is a chronological chart.
So I have prepared a detailed chronological summary of how I see, based on my studies, of how we order different events. I've done that so far, and hopefully that will be shared sometime soon. Operation Josiah, like I said, preparing, training teachers and so on. That's some of those things are important and will come out. Are there charts like that already? I'm sure there would be.
there's the book by, is it Wenham, where he goes through the various resurrection stories, putting them in order and giving up reasons why there's differences. There's so there's a book by, I think it's Wenham, who goes through the resurrection, the biblical story of the death, burial, and resurrection. And I'm sure Josh McDowell does a quick one in his evidence that demands a verdict, and I'm sure there's one other somewhere along the line that I've come across, but I can't remember now.
Yeah, so certainly, I don't know, but the people who joined us for module 1 would know that I showed a Bible that I wanted to show also, the Open Bible, which has some good study material, and that has some basic elements of synchronizing the chronology between the Gospels and so on. So certainly there are material which is around. One of the bad things with me is that I always like to do my first principles based study. Go to the ultimate sources and then try to do the work myself, which is a good thing in one regard, but maybe not good in terms of answering some of these questions. So I've seldom read other people's documents, but our brother has mentioned a name here and a couple of names there.
Any questions from
So
the Soko family?
Hopefully
right here
we'll
on
be
the
able
live
to
chat,
pass
please.
those details around to the wider audience.
I think this is a question. Did people spread the rumors and say that the people of Christ came and took him from the tomb?
The people?
If people spread the rumors and say that the people of Christ came and took him from the tomb.
Okay, so what is called the stolen body theory. So that's for the last session. Challenges to the particular argument we've raised. We look at the challenges in maybe half an hour or so after a break. Yeah, after a break.
Should we just go with it? See, this is the same subject.
No, maybe 5 minutes, but at least 5 minutes. I was hoping for the break to be 15 minutes, as a matter of fact, but
We can keep the live chat open for 15 minutes as opposed to like shut it down and then start talking again.
okay. Well, either way is fine. With Operation Steven chat room, what we do is we shut down and then open it again in how much time? So we've got some time now. The last part is relatively simpler. Anyway, it was only for 1 hour, worst case. But we'll try and do it in half an hour. So let's regroup in.
I think we should continue. It's only 30 minutes at some point.
No,
Wait,
I
that's-
think we should get like at least 10 minutes.
Yeah. Let's do 10 minutes break.
Okay,
With
wait.
the questions and everything in mind, we actually.
Okay.
Yeah, people can think through.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes in 10 minutes. Yeah, JC.
Yeah.
No problem. So but we can keep Soko
Yeah, keep
live
Soko,
if you want.
Soko.
So in 10 minutes we'll be back. Thank you. And for people in the Operation Steven channel, it'll be a new link again. Apologies, but if we can do that, because I don't want to. For anyone who wants to just join in, I don't want them to be fooled by the other link. So if we can all please move to the new link in 10 minutes. So the time here in the UK right now is 5:15. We would start at 10-15 minutes. Yeah. So
Family, should I start a new link or should I just keep on streaming? You let me know. If you would like, should we just carry on or do you guys wanna start a new live stream? Arul, what do you think about Noah's Ark being found in the mountains of Turkey? That's
we haven't got.
That's from I am told. I think it's a question, brother.
Yeah. Noah's Ark, unfortunately, we don't have much public information we can go to today.
Okay.
Turkey, for some particular reasons, I'm not sure if it's in Mount Ararat. What is called Mount Ararat in Turkey. I think it could be some other place. but I don't want to sort of fool people, so might not say that. But it's not helpful that Turkey isn't allowing proper research to happen, as I understand. But also the other point is it's a mountainous area, so it's not really easy to do such things. But I'm not convinced so far. So,
Okay.
yeah. Cool.
Just keep streaming. Okay, guys, I'm gonna keep on streaming. Just to give you a little view of the family. Basically, it's just sis Aliana.
Sibu.
Sibu.
Yeah, Raju.
Yeah, no.
Sibu.
Sibu. Yeah, that's Sister Sibu. Sorry, I just forgot the names of the. So, we're on the chat right there. Over here. Yeah, any other questions for Brother Arul, the governor, who's obviously having some fruits? By all means, let us know. But obviously, thank you guys for joining the live stream. Hope you find it edifying.
Yeah, thank you very much for patient listening so far.
Yeah.
And please, it's only maybe half more hour or so. Please be with us.
Yeah.
For the rest of the things also.
I'll say your thing. Yeah, hello, disciple AJ. God bless you, brother. TM cross pulls.
I should. I know.
There's only one God. Yes, we don't. Because there is a praise on what is right. We'll keep that there. Yeah, hello, Tony. Welcome, bro. Good to see you. We have, the family tuned in. JJ, hello, bro. All the best to you.
So, quickly, okay. Mighty Savior. Savior.
I've got it there. I've got it. Scan it.
No.
Now look at that research that you can scan. But it's such a good learning.
Yeah, it's so much. Yeah. How much I learned in 1 week. Me too. Probably like in 2 years of life. I swear. I mean, 1 week.
I'm so different on that.
Yeah.
I know that 1 week.
Then like I did that now I like
Yes, it was, Chris. I mean, you gotta watch it from the beginning, bro. Just a little heads up for the family. We're gonna have a people is gonna be doing a responsibility to Adnan Rashid, and probably we're gonna premiere it around I think 10 o'clock UK time. So make sure the family are tuning in for that.
I wanted to do it and I wanted to learn it. That's why I was like
And support Soccer Films as well, family. You can get your top, your t-shirt, your hoodie. Go to soccer-clothing.com and yeah, you can support that way to the Soccer family. Or Soccer Films in this case.
No, this is the C type. You know, no, that's okay. This is the last one from the someone that you
no.
That's for a reason. Because they're using program.
And then how we was some question.
Which one?
When I normally read it, I would go to when I read like that. Actually, I didn't see it. It's actually, it was like, oh my God, it's actually just when I started to connect it.
like 4 different live streams. You got part 1, part 2, when it comes up or
That's what I'm doing.
Oh,
joint channel.
No, because it's
I mentioned myself.
To me, the second idea would be something more in the US, like might just come over.
Yeah.
They will know what to check. Nowadays it's a fish. As it's already-
We'll be going back online pretty quickly, family.
Yeah. Last time, we're learning to use this place better.
I didn't choose, they just said it, and they chose it.
No, but sometimes it's good because sometimes you are hungry, it's good to go and check this.
Yeah.
One comment.
That's it, we just saw
Yeah, Islamic analysis is easily available. Yes, we will not as long as they don't.
Nelson will definitely be there. Yeah, I guarantee that. Yeah, because he's always there. Everything. Yeah.
So,
I should know.
We probably might find the four horsemen come up. You know,
Oh, I know.
I mean, I still go to the one that I but the one that I
They used to come here, but I haven't seen them.
They have like afternoon sessions.
I suspect.
Yeah, just for the family who is wondering what's going on, we're taking a little break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Yeah.
I just like it.
Today is the 4th week. Tomorrow is the 5th week. Then we got 1 more weekend. We send. That's in the morning, yeah. Then there'll be another.
Yes.
But he is like that, very,
Yeah, we need to get this straight to the
JC, can you help me with mine? You know, that managed to download the last.
Oh, I haven't uploaded the
No, the technical question. I managed to download the last assessment.
To Savior.
I downloaded that. But now it's a new one. I didn't know how to download it. Because I don't know how to rename
Are we?
it. Because then it was because this is like the. I don't know how to rename it. I don't know how to give it a name. Oh yeah, did it? Maybe you don't so I started downloading it. So this is.
Why is this?
Also, family, there is a booklet by Brother Arul. We are now discussing the best options of how to ship this to the family. So please bear with us. And we'll also give more information in due course of how you guys can get it, right?
Okay. Well, we should be careful. We don't disturb this.
Yeah, I mean,
Now the thing is becoming more. I need to.
Unstable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's broken there, which I saw only this morning. I need to stick it properly.
right, okay. No, but
Just at the neck.
that's not on though. That's not on.
Yeah, it's not.
All right.
So I'm trying to.
Big Ass Snow Legend, the leopard. Hello, buddy. Aaron Chadwick.
Okay, let's see. Oops. See.
Okay, I think we can make.
No, it's
Yes, I think that's a little stable.
Okay. Well. Okay.
Alright.
I see. Okay, so I got the listening. Yeah. What was the listening? Oh, that's good news.
Alright. So even if I don't start.
So can I copy the other document? Yes.
So she's got to prove me wrong.
Thank you, Salomon. Thank you, bro, for joining the chat. What this guy said? Allahu Akbar, warrior of G, man. We got the Muslims also tuned in.
Yeah, right now.
Huh?
Are you saying right now? Or?
Yeah, just to say there's a Muslim there writing Allahu Akbar.
Well,
Hey, you might have a question for Brother Arul before he starts the last session. Warrior of Yemen. Must be on topic though, because the topic is
Resurrection.
the resurrection.
Facing challenges.
Facing challenges to the resurrection. So any questions on that topic, you can state it now, because once we get going, Arul the Governor is going to go and present his case.
Cool.
How's Mimi and Lily?
What do we? So let's get this, Brother JC. So let's get this
Yeah.
to work.
Yep.
And let's get our other stuff to work.
Let's get rocking and
Alia?
rolling.
So that's the issue.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Father, praise you, Lord. God Almighty, praise you. Okay, let's go live. Turned on.
Hello. Test.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Audio. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Test.
Yeah, Father, praise the Lord.
Wait. No, test. Okay, it's not working. Hello. Okay.
Is it working now?
No, this. Okay, well, we're rolling now.
Praise the Lord. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not big enough.
Okay. And live stream, video, audio. How are things on the new link, session 4? Circle.
Good from the family? Is the sound good, family? Please let us
Audio.
know. Is the audio good?
Yeah.
Yeah, all good. Cool. Yeah, all good from this side.
Cool. How is the sound, Brother Raju? Sound right?
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay, cool. Cool, sounds good. So, shall we start then?
Yep.
The last part. Facing challenges to the resurrection account. And that's a simple screen. So we'll do a bit of free flow sort of conversation based on that, things in that screen. What kinds of challenges, main challenges, have surfaced in regards to the resurrection account? One family of challenges I don't want to deal with right now, because they are really going to be dealt with in another module. And that is in regards to the canon. Which books do we consider? I'm going to give just a simple point right now, which is we have solid reasons to say what we have in the New Testament are the only authoritative books corresponding to the disciples' witness accounts. And this we understand through a few different historical artifacts, including Muratorian canon and so on. So the canon-related argument we're going to deal with in a separate module. That's a deep module, and at that time we'll be dealing with manuscriptal variants and so on, related information also. But for now we're going to stick to a simple template. Apart from the canon, what kinds of families of arguments have been advanced? Well, the third one, other explanations are possible. Well, what explanation? People have suggested a few already, but beyond that they'd only say, well, maybe there are others. Maybe I can construct a complex case, and so on. So people have tried. Let's look at a few different such other possible explanations. one of which actually was raised as a question towards the end of the previous session. That's one area, one kind of challenge. Let's see if that challenge holds water. Another kind of challenge is perhaps the disciples weren't reliable witnesses. People can bring that up again because, of course, challenges are not normal, are not necessarily always rational. Even if you made a rational point already, people can still reiterate the same stuff over and over again. So people can bring that up. Another main area people have tried to advance. There exists other dying and rising messiahs. Remember I said death, burial, resurrection. If the resurrection is true, everything else falls in place. And that is where some people have really understood that. And they have tried to use all sorts of other examples where they portray people of religions of people corresponding to religions of Indian origin, religions of Egyptian origin, Persian origin, Roman origin, all sorts of religions. And they say, oh, wait a second, we have a similar character there. How about this one? He also seems to have died and come back alive. So why do you think Jesus is special and so on? That's another kind of argument. And the other kind of argument which I want to briefly touch upon today, although the comprehensive dealing of that would again be in the module dealing with manuscripts and canon. And that is perhaps the documents that we have are not reliable enough. Yeah? So 4 different things. Let's go, maybe the first one first, please. Documents are unreliable. And this is sort of the particular argument I'd really like to focus on briefly today is the kind of argument that people like Bart Ehrman advances. What is his argument? His argument is New Testament manuscripts have variant readings. We have we have thousands of copies of the Gospels and so on. And there are variations, certainly across different copies. So his point is, oh, wait a second, if there are plenty of variants, how do we trust this? Which seems like a very innocent and logically sound argument to make, unless we look into the details. So his point is, how do we trust? We really can't, it's very hard to trust and therefore I would not trust, is his argument. Documents are unreliable purely based on the manuscriptal variants. And that's the only thing I'm focusing today, not the canon, just to be clear. Now, what is the argument? So here is where I really like Hyde Park-like debates. With people like Bart Ehrman and everyone else, I really think it's very important for Christians, of course, to be kind to the other person we are discussing with, but to also expose silly ideas for what they really are. As silly ideas. And unless we do that, we don't respect them, love them properly. So we really need to expose these things properly. And one of the things is Bart Ehrman unfortunately hasn't so far debated, in my knowledge. I haven't watched all of his debates, but some of his debates that I watched, he hasn't debated a person who really has taken him to task. Almost everyone has taken him to task in terms of the arguments. But I haven't found anyone taken to task in terms of exposing arguments for what they really are through sarcasm and so on. Like things are you really saying this? Sort of thing, you see what I mean. So my point there is precisely this. The point that I'm going to present right now is not my own point. I'm careful listening to so someone essentially gives this point, and this came up in a debate with Bart Ehrman, except he really didn't use the tone properly, so the point wasn't, I don't think would have been registered properly by everyone. And the point is this: yes, of course there are manuscriptal variants. That is very true. Manuscriptal variants, we Christians are the ones who are exposing them. It's not as if we are trying to hide the manuscriptal variants, and we don't. It's not a huge problem for us. God never said, I'm going to make sure everyone who writes a copy writes in a proper way. That's not a guarantee that God gave, and therefore we are employing normal means to make sure we are getting as much content as possible. So manuscript variants, existence of them is true, but the very, very important point is this. We already know of the kinds of texts, what we call family of texts. I'm going to mention only briefly today terms like the Western text, Byzantine text, received text, textus receptus, and so on. So you find categories of text. Well, what do they really mean? For those who are not very clued up on this particular area, the idea is manuscripts are variants, but they're not random variants. They seem to follow a pattern. It seems like it's very likely that a copy made somewhere was either had mistakes inadvertently and propagated those mistakes later on purely because that copy was the one which was used for making further copies, or it's also possible in some places people who were copying weren't really Christians, educated in the way Christians should be, and they also had interesting ideas that they can manage, manipulate, and so on, and could have changed things. That's also possible. But regardless of all that, we see a pattern, and the pattern means we have a few different families of different variants which manuscripts fall into. So let's say if we take the last decade or so of new findings of manuscriptal fragments or even entire manuscripts, which is, by the way, happening, if not on a day-to-day basis, on a fairly regular basis. There is a website, I think, called NSTCM or something. I can't remember exactly off the top of my mind. I need to check here. But essentially, there is a research group whose sole focus is collecting manuscripts, taking digital copies of them, cataloging them, and making information about them available online through their website. New Testament, something I've forgotten the name now, but CSNTM. CSNTM is the name of the website, and that's a very good website. That's sort of an authoritative website in terms of getting these copies. But the point is this: we know families of manuscripts, and new manuscripts which are found are not deviating much away from the existing families. In other words, texts that we have for the Gospels, for the things that we used to come up with the conclusions, text is already converging. They're not diverging, converging. In other words, the point would be, yes, there are variants, but we now seem to know all sorts of possible variants. And therefore, look at all the variants that you want to look at, and you would still see it in case that they're made to be true. Do you see what I'm saying? The variants are not impacting the argument that we're making at all. That is the crucial part. So when Bhajaman says, oh, there are variants and therefore I give up, we only say, oh, if there are variants, you better do your homework even better. Spend even more time. That's what you're being paid for. You're an academician, you better do this properly. Text is converging, so no problem in that regard. To claim documents are unreliable is just wrong. I personally I don't prefer all the families of text in the New Testament. I don't personally, for some particular reason, but I won't get into that right now. But the fact of the matter is, individuals can have preferences for the family of text that they think is really close to what was written down as the Word of God in its autograph. You can have preferences, but even if you ignore those preferences, to claim that it's unreliable is just making a fool of yourself. It's all there, text is converging, you better get on with our lives with dealing with the text properly. Okay, that's in regard to that particular argument. Second one, there exists other dying and rising messiahs. And in the book here, I've essentially dealt with this as a brief appendix. And for people who are here, you'd get copies of this book. I've got some spare copies today. And for people who are watching online, we need to fairly soon, both on Soko and Operation Stephen, we need to find a way to fairly soon pass copies of this book to you also. But I've written an appendix here, Appendix C, a note on Jesus' life and pagan myths, bringing together some expert comments based on what we find in pagan mythology. In pagan ideas. First point to make. In terms of logically sound argument, whether there exist other people of a similar nature or not is irrelevant. If Jesus died and came back alive, whether some other Tom, Dick and Harry had tea this morning or took shower earlier today, none of those things are relevant. You see what I'm saying? The case that we've made here is independent of any other myth. That's first thing to remember. If Jesus died and came back alive, he ought to be taken seriously. He seems to know what it takes to give life, to have life after you are dead. And therefore, we better listen to him carefully. Whether you have other sources or not is immaterial. You might have, might not have to begin with. That's point number one. Yep, so far with me. Point number two, and the other points are what I really like to read from what I've written here. Having said that, just for completeness sake, it would be worthwhile to point out that when we get to the details of the lives of the pagan deities, of which we have a few, I've listed a few here: Osiris, Attis, Dionysus, Mithras, Adonis, Tammuz, Hercules, Rhombus, Apollonius, Apollonius of Tyana, and Empedocles. A few different deities of Roman origin, Persian origin, Median origin, and so on. Tammuz is Canaanite in origin, and so on. So you have a few different things here. But the point is, it would be worthwhile to point out that when we get to the details of the lives of the pagan deities, we would find many glaring holes in the argument of similarity with the life of Jesus. For starters, none of these pagan deities is even remotely qualified to be called a historical person. Who, in what point in time, advanced doctrine about Osiris as a historical doctrine? I saw him alive, I've come here to testify of him. You better become Osirinians. Osirianians. Not Christians, but Osirianians. You see what I'm saying? At no point in time, at the origin of these ideas, let me just stick to a neutral term here. These ideas, did people go around claiming these ideas to be historically valid? People are claiming today. I'm talking about the origin and later, before today. I'm not talking about the last couple of decades. I'm talking about prior to that. How many did that? No one. So no one really intended this to be a historical story. So none of this is even remotely qualified to be called a historical person. Furthermore, the deaths and the resurrections of all these deities, by the way, which I've listed earlier, of all these deities are in no way like the regular death of Jesus on the cross and a bodily resurrection without unwanted embellishment. With Jesus, what we're talking about is a proper resurrection. You die and the body comes back alive. If you go through all these pagan myths, there's one more point I'd like to make in a minute, but if you go through all these pagan myths, ignoring the period at which they began to be spread around as myths, not as historical accounts, as myths, what you would find is they were mostly introduced as agriculture-related myths. Oh, now it's a harvest season, now it's a sowing season and so on. So that's where the spring and so on. So that's where you have we have the God dying now and he's rising back again. And he does that on a yearly basis. And now he's dying again, now he comes back alive. And if it rains and if it's not amenable for doing proper agriculture in that year, you might think, oh, the God isn't happy with us for some reason or whatever. That's the kind of idea conveyed in these dying and rising myths. Nothing to do with, I have seen Jesus, nothing to do anything like what we say with Jesus. I saw this man, he died in human observation. He was buried in a regular tomb, and the tomb is empty now. You see the difference? And the other ideas are just purely fantasies about agricultural seasons and imagination of God's association with those agricultural seasons. So regular death of Jesus on the cross and bodily resurrection, that's not comparable to this. Finally, in some cases, it would even be difficult to argue that some elements of the mythologies of these deities even predate Jesus. It's very, very hard. If you do your research on these dying and rising gods and so on, they are very, very late sources of claims that they existed beforehand, for which we don't have any evidence. So when was this idea cooked up and began to be communicated based on evidence? If you stick to evidences, it will be really hard to say this God predates Jesus at all. Having said that, I am willing to concede that there is a tiny chance, I think there is a chance, in not in a way similar to Jesus, but in slightly different ways, similar ideas have been conveyed in the past. And there are particular reasons for that. This is where I go back to the... but for people to establish that today would be really hard. If you want a clue as to what you can use to establish such an argument, I'll tell you the clue, and that is the Bible. The Bible, when the women came to Peter and they said, we saw him alive, Peter said, this sounded to him, I think the writer says it sounded to him like idle tales. Apparently implying there were tales like that which were around. If you see what, so the Bible is the only place you can come to, but of course if you come there, you better take Jesus seriously before you get to anything else in any level of seriousness. In other words, pagan deities historically, in a credible manner, to establish them as somewhat similar to Jesus is just wishful thinking, doesn't work. If we apply the rigor that we apply to Jesus, and which we have, and also similar studies with the Old Testament, if you apply that level of rigor, you won't find convincing arguments with regards to the deities. Okay, perhaps they weren't, let me go to the fourth one first and then come back to the third one. Perhaps they weren't reliable witnesses. Okay, interesting. Why were they willing to die? What is your definition of weren't reliable? If they were willing to die, they were convicted enough. When I say reliable, weren't convicted enough. They were willing to die, so what's your problem? That's the definition of conviction. I am willing to stand by what I say. What's your problem? That's the primary argument, which we've already made. Now, the reason I put that here is to make some secondary arguments. And the secondary arguments are things like, okay, let's for a moment pretend they weren't reliable witnesses. But who made the tomb empty? Wishful thinking or lying doesn't make the tomb empty. The Romans were on the case. They had 3-level protection. You can't imagine a body out of a tomb. Right? It doesn't work that way. So whether they're reliable or not, we found we earlier saw that the conviction was real as per witness accounts. And on top of that, for anyone to make any further argument would just be ridiculing their own position, if you see what I mean. Tombs don't go empty. So once that has been shown, no one should really be even attempting to make that point. Now, other explanations are possible. I'll give a few examples. There was a question at the end of last session, and the question was, could Jesus's disciples have stolen the body? Well, the answer is, okay, let's consider that. Could Jesus's disciples have stolen the body? Okay, yes, let's say for a moment, yes, they could have. How did the Romans not know about it? They were guarding that place. How come you come and steal when the Roman guard was there with a 3-level protection at the tomb? For problem number one. Are you saying simpletons, fishermen, and so on came and fooled a very sophisticated military apparatus? That's point number one. Point number two is what we saw in the table. Okay, they fooled, they stole. Why were they willing to die for what they know to be not true? You see what I'm saying? If they knew well they were lying about the resurrection, why would this happen? And that is the point we made a while ago. In other words, to say that they could have stolen is really just to say maybe they weren't convicted enough. But again, the problem would be, why would they stand up to persecution? Why would they consider themselves as willing to even give up their lives? Why would they consider themselves to be immortal? Why would they do? I mean, if one guy does that, that's fine. I mean, there are people who have all sorts of weird ideas. Why would they do in mass scale? And there too, the other important point is note carefully the persecution. Remember I said earlier that I come back to the in Jerusalem again. Yeah. If you look at mythologies carefully, there are mythologies in the world. Some people are really convicted about even mythologies. But if you go through mythologies carefully, one of the important traits in a myth would be that the origin of the myth would not be accessible to you. You won't be able to go verify. You see what I'm saying? Or such and such God did such and such things during his time in this garden or whatever. People may take it seriously. Oh yeah, okay, I'm a religious man, I take this seriously. The point is, but if you talk about that particular guy is living next door, died and came back alive, what would people do? Even these people who give in to myths might say, okay, which next door? That guy, okay, let me go and check. You see what I'm saying? The moment you talk about church willing to go through what they're going through at the origin of where these events happened, at the place where the events happened, Jesus' death, burial and so on, the normal human reaction would be, let me go and check. Either directly or indirectly, I'll do some level of checking. You see what I'm saying? In other words, myths won't have that trait in them. Yeah, consider any myth that you can think of. For example, the Egyptian idea that pharaohs live in the hereafter and they take whatever wealth from us and so on. Okay, what credible narration is given to support that claim from the point of where the claim came out? You see what I'm saying? We saw this pharaoh go in and therefore we are claiming this. Is that how those claims are made? No. They just claim this guy dies and becomes something else. It will be vague. The place of origin won't be available for you to go and check either in terms of time or in terms of location. That is an important trait for a myth, but that is not the case here. In Jerusalem, in the place where Jesus was crucified, Calvary is not is simply outskirts of Jerusalem, sort of. When I say outskirts, I'm talking about even the inner city, sort of thing. Calvary is part of. It's not far away. It's not 50 miles away. It's not 100 miles away. It's right there. So the point is, the narration here has an important trait which is against myth, which is the place is accessible for the people who can have access. First century people are in Jerusalem, which is the first century place. In terms of time, in terms of geography, location, it's all accessible. That's where the thing came out of. You see what I'm saying? And that's pretty much like me saying, there is a guy next door, he is God because he died and came back alive. Okay, now the only thing left is, we just started with the other explanations possible. One is the stealing of the body, doesn't work. A couple of other, there are all sorts of other, maybe 5 or 6 other things tried, but all of them would fail in a particular way, which is, let's say, consider 2 other examples. One is what is called swoon theory, which is maybe Jesus never died. Maybe he was just badly bruised and beaten, like Tyson Fury, getting up on round 12 in his first meeting with Deontay Wilder. Like he did, Jesus just came back. And that's what people thought was resurrection. Okay, well, you're fooling them. You're fooling who? Roman executioners got it wrong, is what you're saying? Who are you now? Are you any better than the Roman executioner? You see what I'm saying? Even the best experts today, let's say medical doctors or whoever, testify for the fact that someone died, would only be comparable to them in terms of skill. But in terms of access, they are better. They were there in person. So they knew what they were doing. So you're fooling them. So now you're undermining what was established to be a historical fact. You're doing that, swoon theory, and then let's go to this one, empty tomb. Okay, badly beaten, bruised, but still was inside a tomb which was sealed after a stone was put in place with Roman guards outside. How did he go through the 3-level protection? Especially given the fact that he is just recovering from being badly bruised. You see what I'm saying? How did he push the stone away? But still there was a seal. How do you take the seal away before you can even attempt to push? But even if you manage to do both those, what did you do to the Roman soldiers? None of those can hold water. But this might, people can, of course, if he was never dead, if he comes back alive, he can show. But the fact of the matter is, those 2 are undermined. Any explanation should have all 3 upheld properly. You see what I'm saying? Any possible explanation should hold all of these things properly. Died, buried, the tomb was empty, he showed up. You can even flex it enough to say maybe it wasn't a bodily visitation. But regardless, you still need to show some evidence of why people thought he showed up alive to them. Because they were willing to die for it. So far with me, swoon theory. What's the other theory I wanted to consider today?
The Islamic one that someone else was putting Jesus' flesh.
So we'll come to that in a minute. I'll just make some. 1 second, please. So the other theory I wanted to consider briefly, I mentioned about swoon theory, hallucination theory. Well, of course, hallucination theory is about the witnesses, all of them has hallucinated. They just thought he showed up alive, but he didn't. Okay, well, to claim that all of them could be fooled at the same time is already an overkill. But let's go with you for a moment. How did the hallucination make the tomb empty? Hallucinations don't make tombs empty. You can't think a body out of a tomb. You can move a body out of a tomb. You can do anything else physically to a body in the tomb. To an extent, it's no longer in the tomb. But you really can't think for it to be out of the tomb. You see what I'm saying? That won't hold water. And so the point, so that's another idea, another explanation, another example. But if you take any other theory, I think when I was writing this, I went through a number of theories which were perpetrated. The fact of the matter is, all of those theories go against at least one of these points. And when it goes against even one of these points, it's not a valid explanation. With that having said, we are going to wrap up. We already beyond our allotted time. Any question or comment right now? Yes, Brother Raju.
Yeah. So two questions really.
Yeah.
That's good. That's fine. You can speak up there.
Yeah. Two questions.
Yeah, both related. The two questions are, were there any other guards besides the Roman guards there? In other words, were there any guards from, like, say, the Jewish faction?
I wouldn't think so. There's no indication of any such thing.
Right, okay. And then the other question is, what happened to the Roman guards? I mean, is there any place that says, well, because they were not there when the tomb was empty. What happened to them? Is there any record or history of what actually happened to them? Or do we not know that? Because
No, we don't. Okay, so no. Let me answer this carefully. Was there the first question? I'd like to come back to that again, please. Did the Jews have their own representation? No, they didn't, and that's a huge statement. When they don't have their own representation, even though they didn't like this guy, and certainly they knew that he spoke about resurrection, and therefore there could be all sorts of things that could happen for the tomb to go empty, they still didn't have representation, and that to us tells us how reliable the Romans were. The Jews were confident enough with the Roman apparatus, sort of doing their job there. Point number one. Now coming to the second question, which is what happened to them. Firstly, what would happen to them? And here's where people have studied. I personally haven't done first-hand research on this from first principle, looking at Roman records of military discipline. But what I've heard second-hand from other people, second-hand is that they say the way in which they guard in situations like this is very, very comprehensive. There will be a number of soldiers involved. They'll take turns. Essentially, this is 24/7 duty.
yes.
And at any point in time, there will be a representative. How many I can't remember, whether it's two or not, I can't remember. But there will be a reasonable representation of the entire group. And if something goes wrong, the entire group pays for it.
Yes.
That's the level of expectation from there. And the paying for it in this case would be perhaps even their own lives. Because seriously, the Roman apparatus is, the reputation of the Roman apparatus is at stake here. A very popular case. Jesus is a very popular man and, in the entire land. And so, so that's point number one. Serious things could have happened to them. Potentially. But what we find is, I think it is the book of Matthew. I can't remember which gospel talks about this. But if I were to guesstimate, I think it will be book of Matthew, where it actually goes on to suggest what the Jewish leadership did. They essentially told the soldiers, don't worry, we'll pay you. Can you please just say, disciples stole the body? Just that should be your official account. So they were willing to pay for it, and they were willing to also use